Motion from Councillor Deutschman that was listed on today's agenda and seconded by Councillor James. Councillor Deutschman has requested that his motion, of course, be considered after the public meeting, which is now the case. Before we get Councillor Deutschman to speak to his motion, we have proposed a way of proceeding with the motion if the committee is agreeable. It is proposed that we deal with the motion in three parts. The first part will be to consider whether to reject the 7.2% increase that Waterloo Region Police Service and Waterloo Region Service Board has requested. If this part of the motion does not pass, then there would be no need to proceed with the other two parts of the motion. If we reject the 7.2% increase or vote in favor of the first part, then we can consider the next two parts of the motion. The second part would be to provide direction to the police board with respect to a target percentage increase. Councillor Deutschman's original motion provided for an FTE target, which was taken from the Waterloo Region Police Service November budget proposal. Today, Councillor Deutschman would like to amend the motion to change the wording to a percentage increase recommendation, which would be up to the consideration of the Regional Council. This latter approach is consistent with past practices at Waterloo Region, where Council has provided guidance to the Waterloo Region Police Service regarding the percentage increase. The WRPS and WRPSB would have time to review their budget and come back with a new amended budget prior to February 22nd. The third part of the motion regarding designating funds for upstream services can then be dealt with next. Committee may wish to defer this third part of the motion to after we have final approval of a Waterloo Region Police Service budget as we await a new budget proposal for our consideration. So, if there are no objections to that approach, I am going to call on Councillor Deutschman to speak to his motion. So, okay.
I'm trying to understand what we're doing here. I thought we were sending the budget back to the police services.
Well, we have to vote on that first. Like, this is the whole motion.
All right.
So this is the motion that he's brought forward that he will have an opportunity to speak to. It's been seconded by Councillor James, but we'll actually have to physically do that process, right? So we'll ask Councillor Deutschman to introduce his to move that motion, and then we'll have to call for a seconder, and then we'll move forward with, we'll have it put up here. So
I just have a question on process. So with the three parts, is it like an amendment that we're talking about, or is it technically three different motions?
it's just three different votes.
Three different votes. Okay.
I mean, so
That's fine.
if the first one is up, it passes, we move on.
Yep.
If it fails, then we go home.
Thank you.
So just, Chair,
that's
just
the
to
reality of it,
confirm,
so.
so the first one is whether we are accepting the police budget or not. Is that correct? Yes. That's perfect. Done. If that, as long as things are clear. Thank you.
Yeah, so Councillor Herb. Yeah. So if we reject or approve the first part, then we can consider the next two parts of the motion. And so perhaps I'll allow Mr. Deutschman to move this motion, and then we'll ask for a seconder, and then we'll go back to Mr. Deutschman, and he can introduce and speak to it. So, a question, Councillor Vanderbeek.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can ask Chair Redmond as Chair of the Police Services Board and the other two board members to give us some perspective on this. They obviously are, deal with it most closely, and I'd be interested in their perspectives before we deal with this.
Well, actually, let's get the motion on the floor, which would then open it up for discussion and comment and all of the good stuff. So if you're okay with that, we'll physically get it on the table, or.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask that it be put up so we know what we're voting on?
Of course, absolutely.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Deutschman.
Yeah, so just for clarification, the first vote is simply, do we accept
7.22, I believe it is actually, or reject 7.22? That's the first question. If council decides to accept the 7.22, then that's the end of it. We've accepted that budget and we're done for the night. However, yeah, I know that they're showing, I think they're showing the original. Pardon?
Be it resolved that the budget as presented by the Waterloo Police Services Board be rejected. So that's what it's asking.
Yeah, that same thing.
Well, they were saying, do we support it? So,
Yeah, you could say, yeah, it's still the same.
you were voting in favor for the motion, you're going to reject. Correct. Okay, as long as we're clear. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear.
Okay.
So if we vote no, then we're voting down Councillor Deutschman's motion?
Right,
Okay.
you're accepting.
Okay, got
That's
it.
correct, yes. Yeah, so if you say yes, you're rejecting it. If you say no, well, if you say no, I guess we'll have to maybe have a quick motion to accept, I guess. But anyway, because this is asking to reject. But yeah, so this is the first part is to reject. And then the second part, if we reject, then the second part is to say what percentage increase are we comfortable as a council to having in terms of guidance back to Waterloo Police Services Board. The third part is with respect to upstream services, but we don't have to deal with that tonight because we can just wait until we see what comes back from Police Services Board and we'll know what we're dealing with. And in fact, Councillor Verbanovic's motion yesterday added more funding in that area and sort of dealt with that issue somewhat. So we don't have to deal with the third part tonight. The 1.2, 1.8.
Okay, so Councillor Deutschman, I would like you to, let's get so I just kind of paraphrase things. I think you need to get the motion on the floor, and
So-
then I'll call for a seconder.
Calling second.
And then,
We already have a seconder.
okay,
So basically,
so moved by you, seconded by Councillor James. Okay, carry on. I want to make sure Councillor Hunick's got everything that she needs to and she can hear us, so.
yeah, especially, is there something that Councillor Hunick would like us to read out?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you. I've got it.
All right, great, super. So, do you want me to speak to it then? Okay. So I had sent a note to council last week outlining the approach to this motion that I felt made the most sense, which is the three parts that we just talked about. And I brought this motion because after watching the Police Services Board meetings, reviewing the documents and police budget, I had some concerns, and I felt that if enough councillors shared the same concern, then I wanted to ensure that Police Services Board had time to respond if the budget was rejected, and they could respond for February 22nd. And as a council, we can accept or reject the police budget. And that should be the first question that we deal with before moving to the next. If council accepts the budget, then there is no need to move forward. If we reject the budget, then we could consider the next step by providing some guidance. And this moves us closer to the approach that Councillor James' motion provides for and how regional council had previously dealt with the police budget in the past. And it's a collaborative, cooperative approach. It's not a us versus them approach between the Waterloo Police Services and the community who we all represent. Now, there are a number of reasons why some may want to reject the police budget. It could be the size of the ask, whether it's the amount of money or the number of police. However, some will be fine with the number of officers. However, there's something that we can all agree on. And that is, there is no reason why this council should support the funding of a surplus for Waterloo Regional Police Services. We should not agree to pay January 1 for police that will not exist until April 1st at the earliest. And in fact, we went through that today when we talked about our IT department and the FTEs. We didn't talk about starting to pay January 1 for people that weren't coming until March or April. And that is the ask before us, a 7.22% increase that they're asking the residents of the regional Waterloo to fund a surplus. That is what is before us. And this will exceed $1 million.
And we heard a number of presentations tonight, excellent presentations. But I want you to consider those representing social agencies and the need for funding, how they do so much with so little. As a municipality, we cannot budget for a surplus or a deficit, and we should not accept it from our partners. And in fact, it's clear that the Waterloo Regional Police Services Board recognizes that this is a potential issue because they have provided us with the cost of the FTEs prorated to April 1st in their information. They've provided us with the alternative, but that's not what they're asking us tonight or during this budget. It's a bit disconcerting that the Police Services Board acknowledges that this would result in a surplus, openly acknowledges that. And in fact, one board member suggested if he had been more aware, he would not have supported the prorating of the 2022 FTEs of 35 officers. That would have meant paying January 1, 2022 for 35 officers when 17 of those officers were not hired until December 2022. So that probably would have resulted in somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $5 million of a surplus. So we can only accept or reject what's before us. That is a 7.22% budget that asks us to pay for 19 officers effective January 1, 2023. I'm sorry, but that is wrong, and we should reject it. Rejecting this budget does not have to mean that you reject the 19 officers, which can still be provided as outlined as an alternative in the police budget. The April 1st option is their 19 officers. So if you believe that there should be 19 officers that they've requested, the issue is just when are we paying for them? January 1 or April 1? And we are the people that are responsible for the funds that we collect from the community. We have a trust with respect to those funds, and we need to make sure that they're expended properly. So rejecting this budget is saying we cannot fund a surplus, and we have an ability to create more opportunities to help out the local social agencies, like the ones we heard from tonight, who are doing great work, crime prevention work, and that are helping the most vulnerable in our community, doing so much with so little. So that is what I'm asking with respect to that tonight. And I'm asking that you support the motion to reject this budget. And again, it's not an us versus them issue. It's just recognizing that the ask is too great. Thank you.
Any further debate here? I don't know if Councillor Verbanovic, go ahead.
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, I did ask.
Yep, we'll go back to you. Yep, sure.
I did ask that the chair and the two board members provide us some view and perspective on this. I think that's important for council to hear.
Councillor Craig.
Well, can we start with the chair, maybe?
I thought I was in the queue.
Chair Evan, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I had questions for some of the delegates too, and I never got in the queue. Gremlins. So colleagues, I would have to tell you that I would ask you to reject the binary notion that it is for the police board or for social services, because the reality is this community deserves and needs both. I would also tell you that I think, and I understand that when you're not at the WRPS table, it's easy to maybe misinterpret things that are said. Last year, when 35 officers were part of the budget, the comment that was made was that we put off phasing in that intake in order to keep the budget down. And it's something that many people do when they do budgets. So instead of deciding that we would put the funding in on January 1st, some of it came in August and some of it came in the fall. And the comment that was made by one of our colleagues on WRPS board was saying they would not have allowed that kind of phasing in because it put us behind the 8 ball and we were not able to recruit 35 officers who we needed in that budget year. So it actually is a reverse of the characterization that's just been made. I'd also point out that Chief Crowell has talked very openly about the fact that while we have intakes for recruits, we are actively welcoming officers who live in Waterloo Region who now work at other services. There are police services across Ontario that have huge budgets that are looking at hiring many, many police officers. So the competition for recruits is very keen. So we cannot necessarily arbitrarily say that because an intake is in April, that we do not need the money until April. It's also been clarified, and I thought I sent this to everyone, and if you haven't seen it, I'll apologize, but when Councillor James asked if there was any surplus going into this budget that was left over from last year, it was clarified that no, there is no surplus from the previous year that is now going into our budget. We use the same diligence. This is other people's money, and everybody at the police board knows it. So we have capital costs. You're all aware of certain services that WRPS offers that benefit area municipalities and benefit the region. And we can look as recently as the Human Resource Information System, and that is something that we undertook as a region in partnership with the police service. We can look at the call diversion programs and the fact that there is voice radio that all area municipalities benefit from, but that are flowed through and delivered by WRPS. So there are benefits besides just the dollars and cents. And I would tell you that there was a lot of scrutiny for this budget, and one of the reasons why you see this budget being spaced over 3 years is because the leadership of WRPS felt very keenly that they knew this was a tough budget year. They wanted to be accountable and they wanted to be fair. And that is why you saw the budget that was delivered. I didn't have a problem at all supporting Councillor James' motion about bringing a draft because, quite frankly, I think it's a bit of a war of words. Nothing is final for WRPS board until a budget is passed as part of our budget, which hopefully will be February the 22nd. So whether you want to call them draft estimates, a draft budget, it was WRPS leadership and the board's best guess at what would be a fair and reasonable budget that we could consider in what we all recognize as a very difficult budget year. So I hope that provides a little bit of the background that you were looking for, Councillor Verbanovich.
Well, thank you, Chair Redmond. I'm still interested to hear from the other two, but I guess as a follow-up to your comments, just to be clear, or your last comment there suggests to me that the board grappled with this and came to this number and this recommended number of staff in the budget, recognizing all these factors. And in fact, you could have found your way in a rationale, quite frankly, to a higher number, but because of these pressures, you came to a lower number. Is that a fair characterization?
If I could just add to that, I would, but there also is the competition for recruits. And so the board and the leadership at WRPS felt that it was a very reasonable, sustainable, defensible approach. So yes, there was scrutiny, and there was also recognition that as much as we would love to have hired 55 additional uniform officers as well as civilian personnel this year, that this was a reasonable approach. And yes, there was a lot of scrutiny, and I think an attempt to be very transparent in what was achievable.
Okay, thank you. We can hear from the others.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know if I can be quite as polite as the regional chair, but I'm not going to support this motion, and I'll give you a number of reasons why. And I'm very disappointed in what's happened tonight. Whether it was intentional or not, we've essentially, what's happened is scapegoated the police in this region. That's what's happened. And how do 800 officers out there, uniformed officers, 300 civilians working for the police, feel after watching what's happened tonight? I don't blame the delegations. I don't think we've given the delegations enough information about what really is going on, about the constraints we have with all the upstream services that we want to provide, that we can't because of the limited limitations on funding that we get from the province and the feds. And that's a great part of what's going on. So I have a lot of trouble with what was happening. I want to help the social agencies. In fact, I wrote a memo and said that this is what the budget should be all about. And I concluded that at the end of my memo. We need to do a lot in terms of homelessness. We need to do a lot in terms of the addiction problems, which we really haven't talked about and we need to talk about. And we need to understand the safety issues of what people feel in the community. We had 2 people from Cambridge here tonight out of 32. They weren't talking police. Okay? You got to understand that. In Cambridge, people want to have safety in their community. In Cambridge, with regards to vulnerability, I've said this before, you know, we have vulnerable communities, we have vulnerable merchants, we have vulnerable kids walking to school. And I want to make sure that all of that takes place in a safe environment. I mean, I asked today at budget, can we look at a 1.5% reduction? And that was turned down. I accept that. I don't agree with you. But here, we're looking at a 7.2 and complaining about that. I mean, we're at 9.5. And you have to look at that in terms of what's being asked. So I'm disappointed. I worry about the damage to the morale of the police in this region and what's happened. So, Mr. Chair, I don't think I should say much more. I think I've said enough. But I think you needed to hear that. I've been sitting here all night thinking about what's going on and how unfair it's been, okay, to a group of people. And I think to the delegations understanding a comprehensive picture. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor McCabe.
Actually, I was wondering if Councillor.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, if Councillor Shantz wanted to speak.
Sorry, Councillor Shantz, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Karen and Doug were very articulate in what they said. You know, the motto, if you will, is that everyone should be safe and feel safe. And I know in the rural areas, in particular, there's a sense of not always feeling safe. The complement that services the rural area hasn't changed in decades, and that's a concern to us. Through many of the delegations tonight, I kept flipping back. I took a screenshot of that page from our package that showed the amount of money that we're spending over and above what we're required to spend on social services. And the whole quantum was $147 million that we're spending. And I went through it, and approximately $100 million of that could be considered upstream programming. So not that we don't need more. I understand that. I understand there's gaps everywhere. But I think we need to be careful in saying that we're not doing enough. We are doing a lot. You know, Councillor Craig said, and I was going to mention too, earlier today we asked our staff to go back and consider perhaps reevaluating how we've done our staffing here. And we rejected that. But now we're asking the police board to do just that. So I'm a little, I feel confused about, depending where council goes, you know, how you can ask the police board to do that and our own council not to. The police board has been very diligent. They've gone through all the things that we've gone through here. And yeah, I think that's enough.
Okay. Now we'll go to Councillor McCabe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And I appreciate the work that my council colleagues are doing and will continue to do on the police board. And as I've said previously, you know, the police, we understand the police have a difficult job. They've got a tough job. like any of our public service staff, they're all frontline service workers and very much under the microscope. And you're right, Councillor Shantz, the previous council certainly has invested over the years, and particularly last year, a lot over and above what we're mandated to do for things like housing and homelessness and other things. However, I think in this case, part of, like, if you think back to the motion that we just passed that Councillor James tabled, I think it was yesterday. Feels like a week ago, but I think the responsible thing to do. We've just heard for the past few hours, and I've gotten quite a number of emails into my inbox, and we've heard from lots of delegates tonight saying that they have questions, they have issues with the police services budget as it's presented. We had questions last week when Chief Crowell came here. He took about 2 hours to present the police operating budget. We had about an hour and a half or so of questions where I think we were left, there was some of us, I know I did, still had other questions. My remembering from last Wednesday was that there was a number of issues that the chief said he didn't have answers to from some of our questions, and that he needed to take that back and he would get back to us with information. So I think in the process that we're going through, it's at least reasonable for council to say that we pause, we send this budget back until we hear from the chief with the information that he said that he would return with, and see what kind of impact that has potentially on changes to the budget that the police board might consider. But I think we need to get that information back from Chief Crowell before we approve anything. Thank you.
Councillor Foxton, I'll add you on, Councillor Verbanovic.
Thank you, through the chair. So a lot of you brought issues about policing here, and I have an issue with policing. We don't get it in the township. People were breaking into homes. People were stealing property, and every time we called 911, the response was, "Oh, I'm sorry, there's no officers available." One individual, a business was broken into, the stuff was loaded onto a truck, an employee in a truck followed the truck with the stolen stuff on it, called the police and said, "Just let it go. We have no officers." So what my residents are saying? They're going to get guns. They're going to start to protect their homes. So what did we do? How did we improve? That being said, Councillor Shantz, you and I both voted that we reevaluate the budget. If we believe that there's an opportunity to come with something better, then maybe we believe it for the police too. And I'm going to support the motion. I think it's to reject, so I'll support the motion. Getting so confusing. Because I believe there is an opportunity. I'm not going to support it. It says that the police... I'll read it again before I vote, but basically I'm agreeing with Councillor Deutschmann that we send it back and have them review it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. In fact, it's been common practice in this council for years. When we have a question or at policing or even our budgets, we've sent them back and we've said, you know what, let's see if we can tighten it up. So, but it's different experiences in different places. The woman who spoke from downtown Kitchener, wasn't she great? She gave a whole different perspective, you know, so. So thank you.
Councillor James.
Yeah, through you, Chair Harris. I'm going to support the first part of Councillor Deutschmann's motion. You know, as I sit here tonight, and I just want to keep it real for all of you, I've been getting emails all night about the intimidation that people are getting. I'm getting officers' names of who has perpetuated harm against residents in this region. And I'm sitting here as a Black woman knowing that there's work to do. There's absolutely work to do. There is systemic work to do within the force. And until all of our community feels safe, and you know, as Councillor Craig mentioned, what people feel in the community When that starts to change, then we're going to start to build the trust in the relationships. But I will tell you that there is work to do, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with us as council having leadership and saying, hold on a second. There is a lot of questions that need to be answered. There's clarification that needs to happen. And it is our due diligence to ensure that we do what we need to come to a collective agreement about this final overall regional budget. That is all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I have a question on clarification. I asked it at the beginning, and I still not clear. On the second part of Councillor Deutschman's motion, and what I have in front of me, unless there's been some change, it includes, provides for an expansion of no greater than 8 FTEs provided. Is that what the second part of your motion is with a couple other lines? Is that correct?
Yep, sure, if you want to
Yeah,
explain
so that was the original, because because it gave a percentage in their original November budget, but in consultation with Chair Redmond, it was suggested that that might be considered directing police, although I know there's been debate about FTEs in the past, and Tom Galloway, when he was here, they used to have these sorts of discussions. So rather than focus on FTEs, it'll be, the second part will be what percentage increase are we comfortable in directing the police for an increase? And we can look at, we have their budget information. In fact, if you said the 19 was what you want, you could go to their budget information, they have it there. Starting April 1, it's like 6 point whatever percent. We could just say, that's what we want. It's just in terms of guidance, but the first part is, do we accept what we have before us? And as I said, there's various reasons why you might not accept what's before us.
So what are the specific numbers, or that you've included in the second part of the motion? Because what I originally have here, as far as I'm concerned, that crosses a line in terms of what regional council can ask the police services board to do.
That's not before us tonight.
No, there's no numbers.
There's no numbers. I just explained that there's no numbers before us tonight.
No numbers at all.
Yeah, we're really just focusing on that first part. Do we send it back, or do we go to the 22nd? That's what this motion speaks to, the first part, at least.
Okay. All right, and that's all I'm going to say for now.
Councillor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much, Chair Harris. And this is certainly an issue that instills a lot of passion and a lot of different viewpoints in the community. And I think it's important that as we do that, we reflect on the full breadth of viewpoints. I mean, for example, we heard from some tonight who are opposed and think the budget should be cut. We also heard from groups who sometimes people would think might be anti-police, and in fact came in and spoke about the incredible partnerships that the Canadian Arab women and others have established. I've heard this from African groups in our community who talks about that as well. And so, my role as a governor is to balance all of these things. I can tell you that I make my decisions based on the information and the facts that are before us. And the reality is that we are seeing some serious issues in our community. And we know that our municipalities are increasingly turning to the police on various issues. So, Councillor Foxton, you speak about one person's experience in the downtown. I can tell you that on the other end, I've got my BIA who's regularly asking the police for additional support to deal with some of the challenges and the issues that happen. We have, I've heard colleagues from the city of Cambridge in the past talk about needing additional police in terms of downtown Cambridge and some of their issues. We've seen the city of Waterloo turn to the police for, when something like March 17th, St. Patrick's Day happens, and turning to them saying, we need you to help us with these things. So we can't on one side keep saying, we want, and on the other side, when there's certain facts and realities that we're being faced with, saying, hey, ship it back. And so when I factor all those things in, when I factor, that I had residents yesterday emailing me saying, like, we totally disagree with where you're going with photo radar. There should be police doing that enforcement, right? And so I'm having to explain to them, well, actually, it's the police and everyone who's suggesting that we go and do this because it's a more efficient use of resources. So based on all of that, I will not be supporting Councillor Deutschman's motion, and I won't be supporting it also because, quite frankly, this council has put their faith when we appointed people to various committees on the 3 people who are sitting on the Police Services Board. And in my view, if we fundamentally have an issue with it, it is calling into question our faith in those individuals in terms of the role that they play on the Police Services Board. And I have faith in those individuals, and I'm not prepared to do that. Is there information that we still need to get? Absolutely. And this budget won't get approved and won't get finalized until February 22nd. And I'm sure that Chief Krell, as he committed to, will get that information to council before that. And I see Chair Redmond nodding her head, and I'm sure as Chair of the Police Services Board, she'll darn sure make sure that that happens. So with that, those are my thoughts, and I won't be supporting Councillor Deutschman's motion.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the conversation that my colleagues are bringing, and it's really making this a difficult decision. I really echo the rural comments that Councillor Foxton was saying, that I regularly have residents who call for police and 48 hours out from their call, it still hasn't been responded to. On the other hand, I struggle with people saying that they want to see the budget as a whole, which encompasses police budget, decreased and not have huge tax hikes. I would be open to supporting the first part and sending back on the principle that earlier I did vote in favor of sending, although it did not pass, I did vote in favor of sending our budget back to staff. So of the same essence, I can justify sending back to look at, not to say that I would approve what they come back with. I might, come budget day, wind up approving what is still in front of us right now. So I just kind of wanted to air those, and I recognize that we've had some great delegations on both sides tonight and continued conversation and dialogue with people. I think I'm leaning towards needing to support my rural individuals though, and just the principle on if I can put back our budget, I think we could look at putting back theirs. But I would echo what Chair Redmond was saying on the further points. It's not binary in terms of it's not one or the other in upstream funding. So that part, should we get to it, I don't think I would be able to support. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Deutschman and then Chair Redmond left on the list. So, sorry. Yeah, I was good. Okay, Councillor Nowak.
Okay, I know a lot has been said already. I appreciate Councillor Shantz's take on the rural issues out there. In the past 6 months, in the village of Wellesley alone, we've had 3 fentanyl deaths, 2 brothers. We've had a raid where 29 guns were taken out of somebody's home. On almost a weekly basis, definitely on a monthly basis, I hear of somebody's car that's being stolen in the middle of the night. If not stolen, broken in. There's absolutely no way I could support Councillor Deutschman's motion here. We need more police. Then we talk about speeding coming in and out and the lack of enforcement on the roads and stuff. So, we need those police. We need those extra bodies out there. And I think, you know, the initial intent, if I can say so, from Mr. Deutschman was in fact to cut back on the police numbers. That's what his initial intent was. And I think this motion now is just sort of covering that up. And I really don't appreciate that. To change the motion the way it's been changed, you know, I'm sorry, I can't support this motion at all.
You want to put your hand? Okay. So if you want to speak, if you don't mind using that little button, I know it's difficult and late, but I will go to Councillor Deutschman, and then I've got Chair Redmond and back to Councillor Fox. And I will say that, you know, not that we're getting late because it's an important discussion, but, you know, technically 5 minutes total is what a member would get to speak to this. So, you know, giving some discretion for some back and forth, but carry on.
I just saw it as wrapping up. So, you know, I'm not going to get personal about this, and I just want to clarify. I mean, rejecting this is not rejecting more police. Rejecting this is saying, I mean, I'm sure Councillor Nowak is a good steward of his finances and finances of Wellesley Township, as I'm sure Councillor Verbanovic is a good steward of finances. He's been spearheading things at Kitchener for a long time and doing a great job. And this is just saying, if someone can show me a situation in one of your budgets in the past where you've said, we have people coming in April, but we'll start paying January 1 for them, then yeah, I'd like to hear that. But that's what we're being asked to do here. We're being asked to pay January 1 for people that aren't coming in April. This is not reducing police at all. It's still the same 19 that they've asked for. It's still the same number of people. It's just saying you can reject it because you don't believe we should be providing the police with an extra $1 million that they don't need to accomplish what they said they want to do. That's it exactly. And all you have to do is look at their own budget. They've given you the April 1 start date and what that would be. They've prorated, they've given that to you. So, and it's again, not a one or the other. I don't know where the concept of upstream services or policing came up. It's always been a collaborative approach. Chief Crowell agrees it's a collaborative approach. He agrees that both are needed. We all agree that both are needed. So we're not trading off one versus the other. As I said, you can still agree that that's the number of police that are needed, the FTEs, and everything else that they've asked for would still be provided effective April 1. I don't know why there's a hint of anger in the responses here. This is just saying, no, I don't want to spend that extra million that shouldn't be spent. And look, you can read the transcripts from the Police Services Board. It's clear that it is acknowledged that there's a surplus, and it's easier to explain away than to deal with it in a different way. Okay, so you know, I'm not going to get in there. I'm not impugning anybody's character here. I think it's fair to bring this forward because even on a financial basis, there's a good argument to say it should be sent back, and go from there. It's not a sure you have people that are angry about what's going on, and you have people that are happy about what's going on. We recognize all that. But this is just a matter of, as I said, you can find different things why you might agree or disagree, but at the end of the day, given that we are trying to find ways to fund various things and to reduce the overall tax levy, I would have thought this was an easy way. And I can't recall a situation in a police budget where they've been paid effective January 1 for officers that don't come until later on. This would be a first, this would be a precedent.
Point of information or clarification, Chair Harris, because it was referenced with respect to City of Kitchener's budget. Every municipality deals with the, new staff in a different way. I can tell you, when we've been able to, we have fully funded a new position in the budget, because all that does is simply make sure that we don't end up putting that burden onto the next year. When we've needed to, quite frankly, split things up, we have done that, like we are, what staff have proposed here in some instances. So I think to suggest that that has not happened before is not accurate, and I need the record to reflect that.
Point of clarification, I think that's a bit misleading, Mr. Chair. I mean, it's a matter of paying for what you get when you get it. So whether it goes into the next year, you're increasing the amount because that's what you're paying for. Your question is whether you have a tax levy hit in the second year versus the first year. That's the point of clarification.
Yeah.
So again, you're funding January 1 for people that aren't coming yet.
Colleagues, I am going to jump to the extension of our meeting. We're nearing 11 o'clock, so notwithstanding Section 7(9), council may continue the meeting after 11 p.m. by passing a motion to extend the meeting. That must be approved by 2/3 of the members present. A motion to extend may not extend the meeting for more than 1 hour, and another motion must be passed each hour. So I believe Councillor Foxon has moved the motion to extend. Do I have a seconder of that? Councillor Liggett, please vote. The motion will be brought up on the screen. Councillor Huenick, did you hear that? We're going to
Which motion are we voting on now?
We're voting
Sorry.
to just simply extend the meeting past 11 p.m., knowing that we're getting close to 11.
My PSW has been waiting for an hour and a half already, so I would vote no.
Okay. So we're going to correct it. Is the motion on...
Oh, okay, but it's still to extend. It's to extend.
We are voting to extend the meeting. Yeah. And we need 2/3 of council to support this, so 11 people. I vote in favor of it. So that's 11. So there we go. There we go. Okay. I believe Chair Redmond was next.
Thank you, Chair Harrison. You're doing a great job. Trying to bring clarity to this. I guess, colleagues, what I would ask you is if you vote in favor of this, and I will not vote in favor of this motion, what is your expectation? It isn't just that you're rejecting the budget. You're then saying, because there's two other pieces to this, and I would go back to, and again, I have I don't have the new wording in front of me. I have the former wording from Councillor Deutschman and Councillor James. You are taking money from the police budget, and you are saying that it is being earmarked to upstream in community funding. So there is the connection. There is the binary conversation of we are taking money away from the police budget, and we are going to now invest it in another way in the community. So that is the binary argument that is embedded in this motion. Chief Crowell has undertaken and assured me that you will get all of the information for all of the questions that you asked during the his presentation. So Councillor Bravanovich is quite right. You will get all of that information before final budget day. And again, I would reiterate, no budget is final, ours included, until we all vote on it on budget day. So you still have time to get that information back. And I do want to go back, because Councillor Bravanovich made a really good point. One of the reasons why our colleagues on WRPS were lamenting the phasing in of the 35 officers from last year is because it wasn't a big hit on that budget, but when you annualize it, and we all understand what that means, it was a big hit on this year's budget. And it is one of the reasons why we decided that we weren't going to put off that kind of hiring, because it does put the next year's budget under stress. And again, I would reiterate, there has been clarification that there are no surplus dollars from the previous year's budget going into this year's budget for the WRPS. So I think a lot of things have been conflated. I think there's been lots of good points made, but I do question if somebody is voting to reject this budget on the basis of getting more information, what your expectation is, because there are two other pieces of this motion. Unless you reject both of them, it seems to me that it's the dominoes are starting to fall.
Councillor Wolf.
Call the question.
Well, do we have you've made the motion to call the question. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Salonen. I guess if
I have one more comment I'd like to make.
So we've got a motion to call the question. We have a seconder. We're going to vote on calling the question, which would either, move to the actual vote of the motion or continue debate. So we're voting now on calling the question. So hang tight. We'll get it loaded. We'll vote on calling the question. Councillor Hunick, you're calling the question, yes.
I'm in favor of calling the question.
Okay. And you're opposed, Councillor Noack?
Pardon me?
You-
I did vote.
You did vote? I'm in favor of calling the question.
I wasn't in favor. I wanted to make one more statement.
Oh, okay, so I see. That motion is carried. So we will now move to the main motion. And just, Councillor Hunick, for your and for everyone else's information, we are voting now on, be it resolved that the budget as presented by the Waterloo Region Police Services Board be rejected by Regional Council and be sent back to Waterloo Region Police Services Board for review. That is what we are voting on. Is there any further clarification as to what we're voting on?
So if you want to send it back,
Should this be a recorded vote?
Yeah, I believe it has already been requested as a recorded vote. So if you want to send it back to the police, you would vote yes. If you don't, it would be no. And again, regardless, we're going to still deal with it at committee next week, the 22nd. Sorry, 2 weeks, the 22nd.
To clarify, if I could, for the Police Services Board, sending it back with what expectation?
That
No.
would be the second
Yeah,
part.
we got to do the first before we get to the potential of that. So again, we are voting yes to send it back to the Police Services Board. No, we're not. Okay, so it's a recorded vote. So Clerk Short, I'll let you do the roll call or do the vote. Recorded vote.
Yeah. Chair Redmond,
Opposed.
Councillor Craig. Opposed. Councillor Deutschman. Support. Councillor Herb. Councillor Foxton.
Support.
Councillor Harris.
Opposed.
Councillor Hunick.
In favor.
Councillor James.
Support.
Councillor Liggett.
Opposed.
Councillor McCabe.
Support.
Councillor Nowak.
Opposed?
Councillor Salonen.
Support.
Councillor Shantz.
Opposed.
Councillor Urbanovic.
Opposed.
Councillor Williams.
In favor.
And Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
So that's a tie vote, which means that the motion loses.
Okay. Before we leave for the night, I'd like to let council know that we will be starting the strategic planning and budget committee meeting at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, February the 22nd, 2023, from our original time of 3. So we're going to move the meeting from 3 to 11 on February the 22nd. We will be canceling the Board of Health meeting, and instead we'll begin the closed council at 6 p.m., followed by an open council at 7 p.m. on the 22nd of February. With that, I would call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Salonen, seconded by Councillor James. All in favor? Carried.
What was
Starting at 11
when?
on the 22nd.
11 and?
Yeah. Well.